It is common to hear the term communist be used as a pejorative for left-wingers in America, particularly social liberals. This lingers as a holdover of Cold War-era politics when the communist Soviet Union embodied an amorphous left-wing enemy, and by default, the United States was thus this right-wing conservative capitalist force. But those terms seem to have gotten lost in translation somewhere along the way, as by the standards used today, it might have actually been the case that the Soviets were the conservative power and the Americans were the liberals. Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another video for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We have videos like this every week, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. But first, give Mr. Z a moment to talk about probably one of his favorite things, and something I think will make a perfect gift for your friends and family this holiday season. You know what I'm talking about, the Ridge wallet. It's been a long time since we've talked about our pals over at Ridge, but I tell you, I still haven't gotten tired of my Ridge wallets, and they've never failed to catch some attention. Just to remind you guys, Ridge Wallet is made out of durable RFID blocking materials, holds up to 12 cards, and has plenty of room for cash whether you're using their money clip or the cash strap. And still it manages to be slimmer than your average leather wallet. Not to mention these things look great, and they've added a bunch of new colors and designs since the last time we've talked about them. Plus you can now customize your wallet to give it an extra bit of personal flair. This is a pretty nifty feature too, but maybe I'm just a little too old-fashioned for it. You can get this swell little air tag to attach to your wallet and never lose it again. Now get this, they make more than just wallets now, with probably their most famous new product being their compact key case that'll hold up to 6 keys in a convenient case without them jingling all around. And yeah, you can get in all sorts of colors and designs, plus if you bundle your key case and Ridge wallet, you'll get up to 30% off. Every Ridge product is backed by a lifetime warranty and a 99-day risk-free trial period. If you aren't completely satisfied, send it back within 99 days for a full refund. Hear me out, folks. Ridge is having a holiday sale right now, and you can take advantage of this discount, but only if you follow my link in the description below. That's ridge.com/MrZ. And when you use that link, you'll be able to enter for a chance to win a Ridge merchandise bundle worth $4,000. Let's give a big thank you to our favorite brand for sponsoring this video. Now without further ado, let's get back to it. The Soviet Union was communist. It was economically left-wing. It held no qualms using government power. But the social values of the Soviets were far from what today in America is associated with the left wing. Soviet social values emphasized things like discipline, adherence to authority, family cohesion, community cohesion, abstinence, hard work, and physical health. And while the USSR had adopted a hostile position toward religion, this generally softened in the post-Stalin era, and behind closed doors, religious adherence remained strong. The notions of social equality often associated with modern-day left-wing thought were not found in the Soviet Union. Homosexuality was illegal and regarded as a mental illness until the USSR's collapse, with a poll conducted in 1989 indicating that homosexuals were the most hated group in the USSR by the general Soviet population. Sexual reassignment surgery was classified by the Soviet Union as bodily mutilation and, quote, utterly unfit to Soviet ideology. Calls for greater representation from various ethnic minorities were often dismissed as disruptive and counter-revolutionary, with focus remaining firmly on the development of a singular Soviet identity largely defined by the Russian majority. Further, the USSR had very strict migration policies both for moving into and out of the country. Secure borders were crucial to the Soviet Union as a matter of national security, but also for the sake of enforcing adherence and total integration of the population to the culture and regime of the USSR. Remove the economics, place a Soviet man in present-day America, and he may be regarded as a very conservative fellow. So, what's happening here? Much of the contemporary understanding of the left and right among American conservatives owes its origins to the reframing of the Cold War by President Ronald Reagan and his realignment of national politics. Reagan characterized the Cold War as a struggle between two polar opposite forces, a force of good and a force of evil, religion against godlessness, capitalism against communism, freedom against tyranny, right against left. In the eyes of many Republicans in America, all these opposing attributes became synonymous. On the other hand was the Soviet characterization of America. By and large, it wasn't that the Americans were fascist or racist or homophobic or any of the pejoratives commonly used by left-wing Americans today against their right-wing counterparts. Rather, the Soviets summed Americans up as decadent, indulgent, greedy, shortcomings of moral character, not shortcomings of tolerance. The Soviets saw freedom as an excuse for Americans to indulge in their primitive desires. Capitalism was seen as a tool for wealthy Americans to exploit their working classes. To the communists, the weakness of America was precisely that it was too liberal, that it took no care for its people, that it would not discipline and enforce order for the greater good, and allowed primitive drives to govern and dominate. Soviet morality was not based in radical egalitarianism, as is the case for some left-wingers in the US, or in a belief of total self-sovereignty and freedom as some right-wingers in America see national morality. Rather, national morality in the Soviet Union was based in a sense of fulfilling a greater good for the whole of the community and the whole of the state through both work and behavior. The United States, in contrast, had long been and prided itself on being a bastion of liberal values and personal freedom, an advocate for outliers, for those who simply wanted to live freely. Yes, FDR had introduced a level of government power to the United States which was unprecedented in the country, using this power to attempt to alleviate the conditions of the Great Depression, but it would be his successors Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson, with their Fair Deal, New Look, New Horizon, and Great Society programs, that sought to bring about a period of liberal social reform in the aftermath of the Second Great War. Those sentiments would not vanish, but the role of the government would be shrunk under Reagan, further solidifying this very hands-off, live-and-let-live American mentality which would dominate across the left and right and lead the two to evolve into what they would become in the 2010s and early 2020s. Today, much of both the left and right in America derive some justification for their political beliefs on the basis of freedom or liberty being fundamental American values, with the left holding more firmly to concepts of egalitarianism but also being influenced by New Deal-era social programs and the later concept of a caretaker or welfare state. Meanwhile, the right holds toward freedoms they see as being fundamentally constitutional while also being influenced by Reagan-era evangelical thought. Despite these differences, the reality is that both the left and right in America derive from, or at least pay lip service to, an inherently liberal ideological source, while the Soviets, despite their talk of revolution and equality, could not shake the very traditionalist nature of old Russian culture, which was arguably reinforced by the authoritarian nature of communism, placing pressure upon the population to aspire to the concept of the new Soviet man and embrace communalistic and collectivist virtues like strength of will, selflessness, discipline, to have a sense of stewardship over one's community, all virtues regarded highly in conservative societies and among many conservative Americans today. What should be taken away from this is that the American left is nothing like the old left of the Soviet Union. One might argue leftists in America to be socialist in an economic sense, which would be true of some but not all factions of the American left. One could argue that some leftists in America are Marxist in a social or cultural sense, which still holds truth given the influence of Marxist critical theory on New Left ideology. But to suggest that a social liberal in America is a communist with the intention of comparing them to a Soviet citizen, there is no substance to that. It's like calling a small government Republican a fascist. The two are essentially contradictory. The initial revolutionary nature of the Soviet Union, its anti-class, anti-religion, and general economic positions were what many within America feared back during the first Red Scare. We are talking about a United States at a time when the most wealthy individuals had lived through the Gilded Age, dealt with the rise of organized labor and the trust-busting policies of American progressives, watching their influence pulled away and now having an opportunity to regain some of it during the deregulation of the Roaring Twenties. Naturally, the prospect of Bolshevism rising within the United States was frightening to the upper classes. Meanwhile, the rest of the population was appalled by the anti-Christian nature of the Bolsheviks. As FDR took power and embraced both big government policies and interventionist economics, the economic policies of the USSR were no longer a major point of opposition. They were seen as unfavorable, often characterized as being too extreme, but they were not seen as a polar opposite to American-style economics. Rather, the chief point of fear for many Americans in regard to the Soviet Union during this time was the authoritarian nature of the Soviet government. The concept of American democracy had grown to become a staple belief in the United States and embraced as a fundamental facet of Americanism. To many Americans, the Soviets were evil not because of economics, but because they were seen as a godless dictatorship, unlike the pious democracy of America. Reagan would of course wind America back to a position of seeing the Soviets as a total polar opposite in just about every regard, and with the Soviet Union now gone, the concept of an antithetical force to American conservatism is often conflated with communism, even despite the left-right divide of today no longer being a matter of economics or authority, but social values. In this regard, it could be argued that even in regard to religious adherence, once again given the fact that most continued to practice their faith covertly, the average Soviet citizen was far more socially conservative than the average American, and almost certainly so if we were to compare a Soviet citizen from the Cold War era to an American citizen of today, with Americans by and large having become more tolerant and socially liberal in regards to race, gender, and disabilities decade after decade. The Cold War could be called a struggle of communism against capitalism, of religion against godlessness, of democracy against authoritarianism, and we can easily place who is whom so far. But it might also be fair to call the Cold War a struggle of liberalism against conservatism, in which America was in fact the socially liberal power, and the Soviet Union the socially conservative power. If the Soviet Union were to still exist to this day, it would not be the type of state American liberals or leftists praise, but a subject of collective liberal condemnation, a country regarded as backward, oppressive, anti-democratic, anti-progressive, or even fascistic as per the standards of today. But what do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Mr. Z, out.